what up, though? Welcome back. It is Wake Up Woodward. Thank you, chat family, for kicking off the day with the Woo Crew. If you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button to support. It goes a long way for us. And you know what? Before we talk about, Cade and his teammates and how this Pistons squad is gelling, the chemistry is just right, and they're having some major success. I got to say, though, shout out to our Woodward Sports team as well. I know we're still setting up. We got some interviews that are going to come soon with Trick. And so KG is going to be on the ground with me. But shout out to our squad, man, for covering Rail Jams this weekend and boots on the ground at the Monster Jams as well. Spinny, I know Chase was in the building, JB Smooth, and others. If I'm missing anybody that was there, it was awesome. The content was great. It shows a little bit of who we are and what we're doing. And I just wanted to be able to make sure that I took the time to acknowledge you guys and your contributions.
Yep, shout out to you. Shout out to you guys at the Monster Jam. It looked like an absolute blast. Chase was telling me a little bit of it in the back. Sounded like a great time. And speaking of shout outs, on a Friday night, I had to, and it interfered with a little bit of the game, but I found a way to watch. There was a, I don't know why my wife's company does this, but they were having a bit of a party, like an office party, and I met this really cool dude. His name's Jake Van Dyke. We were talking about sports while everybody else was kind of talking about everything else. So, Jake, you kind of saved me there from being the guy who didn't know anybody. We just got to chill for a little bit. So, shout out. He's a viewer of the show. He enjoys what we do. So, shout out to you, Jake Van Dyke. Have yourself a day.
JVD.
Yep.
Dope. But we got to get into these teammates because as much as we've seen Cade Cunningham make that leap, it's been because this team is truly a good team. You look at Cade Cunningham, JB Bickerstaff, and the people he's brought in. Trajan Langdon even going out there and saying, "Hey, Fred Vincent's he's coming here. I don't care who the next coach is. He's going to be here," and showing that this front office and this organization is going to be a weapon. So shout out to them. Shout out to JB Bickerstaff and bringing in guys like Luke Walton, bringing in guys like Kevin Burleson, who are known around the league for being great basketball minds. And I do believe that it's helping the Detroit Pistons offensively right now, especially in in-game situations, which a lot of people have stated in the past might have been some of the undoing of a JB Bickerstaff. So I'm glad to know that as a coach, he's willing to properly delegate. But when you go down even to the player level, you see Cade Cunningham is getting a lot of help from a lot of his supporting cast. And more times than not now, you're looking at the box score and you're steadily seeing 5 to 6 players in double figures and a dub for the Detroit Pistons. One guy in particular, man, obviously we can always shout out to Malik Beasley.
Yeah.
But shout out to Dennis Schroeder for the game that he had against the Atlanta Hawks, and I believe it's the prototypical game that you want to see out of him, and it had the desired effect. He shot 50% from the floor. You want to see him hit his threes. He was 1 of 6, but he was 5 of 10 from the floor. 4 rebounds, 7 assists, and 16 points for Dennis Schroeder. And that's one person I wanted to highlight as it relates to a guy that I believe is going to help this team be able to boost the expectations from a 42 wins to a 45 or 46 wins.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a lot of other players that we can shout out, from Jalen Duren, Ausar Thompson, and even the Tobias Harris, who continues to find ways to be consistent. Yeah. But Malik Beasley, man, absolute flamethrower, and continues to be one of those guys when you talk about off-ball gravity. If you could show that stat really quickly, the top 10 in off-ball gravity, you will see one Malik Beasley there. And what this does is not just hitting your threes, but creating all that space that we talked about Cade Cunningham having success in. Well, Malik Beasley is one of the top 10 guys in the league at creating that, helping to create that space for Cade Cunningham. So it's not just what you see in the box score, but it's also all of the other small things that this team is doing right now to also help Cade and the Pistons have this type of success.
You know what that top 5 in off-ball gravity, amongst other things, is looking like? That's looking like your 2024-2025 NBA Sixth Man of the Year. That's what it's looking like. Because coming out of the All-Star break, after that prodigious first half, all he does in these first 2 games, talk about Malik Beasley, in 2 wins is average 20 a game on 59% from 3-ball, from deep. Unbelievable. That's what he's done all season long. Not quite to that level, but Malik Beasley's having the best season of his career, and to me, he is more than worthy of a Sixth Man of the Year, and that's almost become just like a night's work for him at this point, which is unbelievable. But there's so many people that you can shout out. Jalen Duren, more for what he did against San Antonio. 21 points, 15 rebounds, was an absolute beast. And oh, by the way, when it comes to Jalen Duren, because I like to also talk about how it relates to other stretches, in his last 6 games, in which the Pistons have been on a 6-game winning streak. He is averaging 5.7 assists per game in these last 6. As Booby Miles' uncle said, and he can pass. But for real, that's playmaking Jalen Duren. You love to see it. Tobias gave you 22 against the Spurs on 8 of 10. Love to see that. Love to see that efficiency. Tim Hardaway Jr., 6 of 10 from 3 against Atlanta, and the Pistons needed every single one of those. Ausar Thompson had a couple of good games, including 7 of 8 with his usual stellar defense. Cade, with help, it's over. And that's what I love to see. I love to see these guys step up and continue to play well because, as we've talked about, Jalen Duren in the month of February has been a different player. Ausar Thompson in the month of February has taken it up an even greater notch. We all know what Tim Hardaway Jr. can do in spurts. Dennis Schroeder is going to help Cade in terms of his usage and in terms of being a secondary playmaker and ball handler, and he showed it against Atlanta in the form of 7 assists. Cade, with the proper help and the proper team around him, it's over for the rest of the league. Certainly for the East.
Absolutely over for the rest of the league. Another player I want to be able to say what up, though, to Isaiah Stewart.
Sure, yeah.
Setting the tone. I don't know if you have that one as well from B-Ball Index, the top 10 in rim protection in all of the NBA.
Oh, yeah.
And you see our guy, Isaiah Stewart, at number 6. And the one thing that I love here is when you look at these other players, you notice that all of these other players have height. All of these other players have the measurables. All of these other players have teammates next to them that have been absolute dogs for years already. But you see one Isaiah Stewart there sitting at number 6. And I believe that as the season goes on, you're going to see him climb because he's actually trending better that way. Earlier in the year, he was down lower in this list, which means over the last 15 to 20 games, you could deduce that he's probably been one of your top 5 in rim protection in all of the NBA. So shout out to Isaiah Stewart because he's setting a tone physically. He's setting a tone as it relates to their team ideology. He is the longest tenured Detroit Piston. Don't get that mistaken. And he's continued to say whatever role this Detroit Pistons team needs me to play, I will play. And now they're doing what I've hoped for a long time. I've said this. I put it in writing. I've said, look, I don't know if he will be starting. I said that he won't be starting when the Pistons are ready to compete. But he will be your Corliss Williamson from a defensive standpoint. Yeah. Let him just be that Tasmanian devil on defense that you let off the bench and have the effect that Corliss used to have from an offensive standpoint. Let Isaiah Stewart have that defensively, and he's stepping in and he's challenging everything at the rim. He's blocking dunks. He's playing physical. He's making sure that promise that they made at the beginning of last season is what they've shown up to in terms of making sure. You know what? Pause in advance. But he said we want to make sure they fill us. If they come into our paint, they're going to fill us.
It is absolutely amazing.
Oh, you're right.
I've said it once. I'll say it again because I think I was talking with Anson last week. He's the heart and soul of this team. And at this point, I don't think you can move him. Like, even if a deal were to come up, I think that he's contributed so much to this locker room in terms of just the energy he brings night in, night out, being a on-the-floor leader, leading the way defensively. He's a big part of what the Pistons do, man, and he needs to be here for a long time. He's the heart and soul.
Absolutely. And shout out to our brother Jeff Iafredi because we had a discussion, me and him, back in a previous version of the show at Feldman, by the way, shout out Feldman, in which he was arguing for Stu's extension and I was arguing against. Whoops. But anywho, it's
shout out Gentry.
Yeah, shout out Gentry as well. Definitely shout out Gentry.
But listen, at that time, it probably made a little more sense to argue against it. But now, seeing that he has help around him and seeing how he's evolved as a defensive player, it makes sense to keep him.
I told people then the money he was being paid was the money that other teams were giving backup centers. That's just where the league was trending. And when you do look at his contract now in comparison to others, it's a really good deal. The problem is, with the improvements he's making right now, he about to get a raise in a couple of years.
This is the thing is there's not a team in the NBA who wouldn't want somebody like Isaiah Stewart, particularly for. I mean, look at this list. Not only do you see 7-footers galore, you see 7-footers with a name higher than 1 in their inches column. Yeah. Wow, that's a big pause, but you understand what I'm talking about. We're talking like Victor. We're talking Victor Wembanyama. We're talking Kristaps Porzingis. We're talking multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert, whether you think he deserves it or not. We're talking about Walker Kessler, who is one of the top guys in terms of block shots ever since he entered the league. We're talking about Jared Allen. We're talking about Donovan Clingan, who's one of the top shot blockers as a rookie. He is 4 inches shorter, Isaiah Stewart, than probably the second shortest guy on that list, which is probably Daniel Gafford.
Listed 4 inches shorter.
Listed,
because
might be.
I know doesn't look as tall as his listing.
And do you know what else?
Like Ben Wallace.
Do you know what else I love about this list? Selfishly, Daniel Gafford, number 1. Cade Cunningham did not have any problems getting to the rim and finishing over Daniel Gafford during the game against the Mavericks. I was there in person. It was highway. It was just like a free pass to the rim. And Daniel Gafford, even though he is a good rim protector, had no answers for Cade, which lends even more credence to Cade being one of the best finishers at the rim in the NBA. But shout out Isaiah Stewart. Plays above his size more than honestly, right now, probably more than anybody in the league right now.
What up, though, KG? Because you were talking about a lot of these players that you're feeling from as it relates to the team around Cade Cunningham. Obviously, Dennis Schroeder and what he's able to do with the usage, Malik Beasley and what he's able to do. But Ausar Thompson, man.
Yeah.
Ausar Thompson continues to just be that guy, and I do believe he's going to continue to be a guy that, whether he's getting the usage or not, you're going to know. You're going to know that he's the better of the twins.
No, he's a force, and I've said it he's a defensive weapon. You can deploy him 1 through 5. He goes out there, he gives you all the effort that he can give you, and now his scoring is start to become, a part of his game as well. He can drive to the rim at will. The Pistons got some really early buckets just off of Ausar Thompson being in the right place at the right time, driving to the hoop and putting it in, man. If he can improve his shooting a little bit, and I know I'm not saying this year, but I think this is something over time that he can work on. If he can improve his shooting just to a marginal degree, he is going to be a real problem for years to come, being a two-way threat in this league. Because he gives you everything that you can ask for. Like I said, he goes out there, he defends whoever you put him on, and offensively he can get to the basket at will. He has vision, being able to drive and kick, to pass accurately. I really like what I've seen from Ausar Thompson, the growth from him. And he's making a real argument to where I don't know if you want to take him out of the starting lineup, even when Jaden Ivey comes back.
No, not at all, man. Like he's a guy who I was looking for the stat because I don't necessarily want to get it wrong, but he's a guy who I believe he has his career high in steals, a steal in I believe 13 straight games. When you look at what his defense has been, especially since January 1, he's been one of the best. I wish I had these stats from B-Ball Index on Ausar's defense. I forgot to get those. Because you're going to see this guy in the top 3 of a lot of these advanced metrics, including the D. LeBron, who is the point of attack guy. Hey, listen, I am disrupting everything. His disruption aspect is insane. And I do believe as they find ways to get him more minutes, and I get it, they're ramping him up. You don't want to do anything that will go against him being able to have a long-term career. Especially dealing with the blood clot. So they're going through a process with him. And I remember earlier in the season, he was on a minutes restriction of 20 minutes. That has lifted a little bit. But I do believe that as we see him be able to be that player that can approach consistently 30 to 35 minutes a game, because he's just one of those guys that fits in by osmosis. He's not trying to go out there and get 20. But if the team says, bro, we need you to go out there and get 20, he can go out there and get you 20. Yeah. And even with the improvement he needs to make with his three-point shot, he's just proven to be, like you said, KG, just one of the most effective two-way players, I'm going to say it, in the league, period. Yeah,
and he gives you a lot in those, little amount of minutes. To be honest, I don't want to really exceed him or see him exceed 30, because I think if you can deploy him 30 minutes a night, that's pretty damn good for what he gives you in that amount of time. And then you have other good defenders on this team to where you don't have to rely on Ausar Thompson to just be your sole defender to go out there and get stops every single game. So I do like the fact that they're revving him up, but if he gets to around 30 minutes, I think that's the sweet spot.
Ooh, and I'm glad that I found this stat because, we've seen it with Ausar Thompson. Even now, he's not getting a ton of minutes. He usually hovers between like the 25, 27 or such. And we've seen his efficiency, both offensively and defensively, just skyrocket, particularly offensively because he was always a great defensive player. I'll just say this. His per 36, very kind to Mr. Ausar Thompson. Per 36 minutes, averaging 16 points and let me see, 8.6 rebounds, 2.9 steals. per 36 minutes.
Gracious.
Told you, he give you a lot.
Last
a little
night,
bit of time.
17 minutes, 14 points.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Let me in 7 of 8 from the field.
7-8 from the floor. Yeah.
Shit, the Pistons' first, I think, 6 points were him. Like, I'm telling you.
And that's why, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, Ausar Thompson being able to be him and dominate games just by without even having a three-point shot. You have to give a lot of credit to guys like Malik Beasley and the Tim Hardaway Juniors as well. You don't need that from Ausar Thompson yet. They're a team that's 5 games over 500 with Ausar Thompson still not having a jump shot. Just let him do what he does. He can cut, he can finish, and he can defend like an MF and demon, and he gets them stocks and energy. That's just what he does right now.
Yeah. Stocks.
Yes. All stocks are beautiful.
I
don't. You love stocks more
Stocks
than anybody.
going up.
I do, man.
But
I
as
do.
you should.
It was born in the era of when I believed Andre Drummond wasn't getting a fair look, and he was one of the top 10 big men in stocks. He was the only big man that was top 10 in stocks in the NBA, and in terms of assists, he was like the leading assist getter as a big man during certain years that he was a Detroit Piston. But from there, I started realizing, you look at guys like Cade Cunningham and Ausar Thompson and their ability to get blocks and to get steals and to be a presence defensively and offensively. That's what you want. And you have more of these guys in your lineup than not, especially when you look at a guy like Jalen Duren, whose defensive presence is starting to bud. And we're also seeing more of his passing effectiveness in addition to the type of offensive threat he is in the pick and roll. And so it's beautiful to see that the Pistons actually have multiple players that we can look at and say, you know what? From offensive to defensive, these guys are trending in directions where they're all going to be impactful, both ends of the court. That's what we saw out of great Detroit Pistons teams of the past. We see this out of these young players now starting to scratch the surface, and that should make every Detroit Piston excited, because if all it took was they put in some growth. You see that they put in the work in the weight room. You see that these guys are doing things that show from a physicality standpoint, they've taken that leap. They don't care if they're getting the fouls. You see Duren finishing at the rim, finishing over people. You see him leading again in dunks per game, things like that. You see Cade Cunningham, don't give me the foul, doesn't matter, I'm still finishing. It's a beautiful thing to see with the Pistons right now.
Beautiful thing to see with the Pistons. And speaking of, I don't want to say beautiful this weekend, it was certainly a interesting weekend for the Detroit Red Wings, and we've got to talk about that because they had on paper a successful weekend, but there's a lot of context behind that, and we're going to break that all down in just on the other side of the break. But first, tell us about Lady Jane's.
And well, at Lady Jane's, we take the pride of getting a haircut. Our talented stylists will deliver an interesting